There is something about emptiness that frightens us. Something about walking into a room where nothing and no one is there that makes the human heart tremble. We are conditioned to believe that fullness is a sign of blessing, that having people around you, having opportunities knocking at your door, having a schedule so full you can hardly breathe, that's what success looks like. But what do you do when you step into a room and it's empty? No applause, no affirmation, no doors swinging open, no one cheering you on. Just you and the sound of your own footsteps echoing against the walls. That's the power of the empty room. Most people think emptiness is a curse. They think if something is empty, it has no value. But in God's economy, emptiness is often the starting point of His greatest works. When the Bible opens, the earth was formless and void. That word void means empty. Nothing was there. No trees, no rivers, no creatures, no life, just emptiness. But it was into that emptiness that God spoke His creative word. It was into that emptiness that He said, "Let there be light." And suddenly what was empty began to overflow with His presence. Don't you see? God doesn't need fullness to move. He doesn't need a crowded room to show His power. He doesn't need you to have it all together. He just needs an empty room. Emptiness prepares us for God in ways that fullness never can. When you are surrounded by people, when you are overwhelmed with activity, when your hands are full of what you thought was valuable, sometimes you can't see what God is trying to do. But when everything has been stripped away, when you are standing in the quietness of an empty place, suddenly your ears are open. Suddenly your heart is tender. Suddenly you are aware that you can't do it by yourself. That's when you begin to hear Him. That's when you begin to sense Him. That's when He steps into the room and makes Himself known. Think about it. The empty vessel in the widow's house was the very thing that God used to bring increase. The prophet didn't tell her to fill her jars with what little she had. No, he told her to gather emptiness. Go borrow empty vessels, not a few. The miracle didn't happen because she had so much oil. The miracle happened because she had so much emptiness for God to fill. The same is true in your life. The areas you think disqualify you, the areas you think make you weak, the areas where you feel completely empty, that's the exact place God wants to move. There's power in the empty room because emptiness is not a problem. Emptiness is potential. An empty room is not a failure. An empty room is an invitation. When you step into an empty room, it means God has cleared the stage. He has removed the distractions. He has silenced the noise so that when He moves, you will know without a shadow of doubt that it was Him and Him alone. Sometimes God allows the room to be empty because He wants to teach you dependence. As long as you think you have enough resources, enough strength, enough wisdom, you will lean on yourself. But when everything dries up, when the applause stops, when the people walk out, when the room is empty, that's when you discover that God is your source. That's when you discover that man doesn't hold your future. Circumstances don't control your destiny, and your worth is not measured by who stands beside you. The empty room reveals that God alone is enough. We often run from emptiness. We try to fill it with noise, with activity, with relationships that don't serve us, with distractions that only numb us. We scroll through screens. We chase after crowds. We keep our lives cluttered so we don't have to face the emptiness. But what if the emptiness is the very place God has been waiting to meet you? What if the emptiness isn't a curse, but a call? What if the room is empty because God wanted you all to himself. Think of the empty tomb. When the women came early in the morning, they expected to find a body. They expected to find closure. But instead, they found emptiness. At first, the emptiness terrified them. They thought something had gone wrong. But it was in the emptiness of that tomb that the greatest victory in history was revealed. Resurrection power came out of an empty place. That's the power of the empty room. What looks empty to man is overflowing with promise in the hands of God. Some of you are standing in the emptiness of your life right now. The job ended. The relationship failed. The dream collapsed. And now all you see are bare walls, silent echoes, unanswered prayers. But don't you know that this is the soil where God plants his greatest seeds? Don't you know that this is the canvas where he paints his greatest masterpiece? Don't you know that this is the room he's about to step into and fill with his glory? The power of the empty room is that it strips away every false source of security and forces you to look up. It takes your eyes off what people can do and makes you depend on what only God can do. It makes you realize that his strength is made perfect in your weakness. It shows you that what you thought was a loss was actually preparation. It teaches you that when man closes a door, God opens a greater one. The empty room is not the end of your story. It is not a punishment. It is not abandonment. The empty room is God's signal that he's about to do something fresh. He's about to do something new. He's about to reveal himself in ways you have never seen before. He's about to show you that he doesn't need a crowd. He doesn't need a platform. He doesn't need applause. All he needs is emptiness. One of the hardest seasons to walk through in life is the season of silence. When you pray and there is no answer. When you cry out in desperation and it feels like your words hit the ceiling and fall back down. When you seek direction and all you hear is quiet. Silence is a strange place because it makes you wonder if God has forgotten you. It makes you question if he's still listening. It makes you doubt if he's still working. But here's the truth. Silence does not mean absence. Just because you cannot hear him doesn't mean he isn't there. Just because the room is quiet doesn't mean God has abandoned you. He moves in silence. Think about it. Seeds don't grow in noise. They grow in silence. When you bury a seed in the soil, it is covered, it is hidden, it is silent. Nobody applauds for the seed. Nobody sees the seed stretching beneath the dirt. Nobody claps when the roots start pressing into the soil. All of it happens in silence. And yet, without silence, there is no growth. The seed is proof that silence is not stillness. Silence is not stagnation. Silence is preparation. Some of you are judging your season by how quiet it is. You think because you don't hear God, he must not be working. But can I tell you, the most powerful moves of God are often birthed in silence. When Jesus was in the tomb, the earth grew quiet. Heaven didn't send out updates. There was no thunder rolling, no angels announcing every second of progress. To the outside world, it looked like nothing was happening. But in that silence, redemption was unfolding. In that silence, death was being defeated. In that silence, the keys of hell and the grave were being snatched. Just because it's silent doesn't mean it's over. We don't like silence because silence makes us uncomfortable. We want noise, we want movement, we want visible evidence. We equate noise with progress, and when the noise stops, we assume progress has stopped too. But God doesn't move according to our expectations. He doesn't have to announce himself to validate himself. He doesn't have to give you a play-by-play play of what he's doing in your life. He is God, and he often chooses to do his best work in silence. Silence is the classroom where faith is tested. Anybody can believe God when they hear him speaking every day. Anybody can trust God when miracles are falling out of the sky like rain. But can you trust him when the heavens grow quiet? Can you keep walking when you don't hear footsteps behind you? Can you hold on when the only thing you're holding is a memory of what he said? Silence separates the casual believer from the faithful follower. Silence proves whether you believe in God for what he says or for who he is. Look at the story of Job. For chapter after chapter, Job cries out in pain. He questions, he laments, he begs for an answer. And for a long time, God says nothing. Heaven is quiet. Friends are talking. Enemies are accusing. But God is silent. Yet it was in that silence that Job was being shaped. His faith was being refined. His character was being molded. And when God finally spoke, it wasn't to explain every detail. It was to reveal his glory in a way Job had never seen before. The silence prepared Job for revelation. Sometimes God is silent because he's already spoken. He's waiting to see if you will stand on what he told you before. If he said he would provide, then silence is the season where you prove you believe it. If he said he would never leave you, then silence is the test where you walk as though he is right beside you. If he said he would bring you through, then silence is where you act like the victory is already won. God doesn't repeat himself just because we're uncomfortable. He waits in silence to see if our faith will echo what he has already declared. Other times, God is silent because he's working on things you cannot see. He's moving pieces in the background. He's aligning people, preparing places, orchestrating details that are beyond your imagination. If he told you what he was doing, you wouldn't believe it. If he explained the process, you'd try to skip steps. So he keeps silent, not to punish you, but to protect you. His silence is not rejection. His silence is strategy. Silence is not God ignoring you. Silence is God trusting you. Trusting that you can handle the quiet. Trusting that you will keep walking, even when you don't hear his voice. Trusting that your love for him is not based on constant affirmation, but on unshakable conviction. It's easy to shout when the choir is singing, but can you still worship when the music stops? It's easy to believe when everything is going your way, but can you still hold on when everything around you seems to fall apart? That's what silence teaches you. When the disciples were on the boat in the storm, Jesus was asleep. The wind was raging, the water was crashing, and Jesus was silent. They thought his silence meant he didn't care. They thought his silence meant they were about to die. But his silence was a test. His silence was teaching them that storms don't control the Savior, and silence doesn't mean surrender. His silence was not because he didn't care. His silence was because he already knew the outcome. That's what you have to understand about the silence in your life. God is not pacing the floor of heaven, wondering how it will turn out. He's not wringing his hands, worried about whether you'll make it. He's not panicking. He's silent because he's sovereign. He's silent because he knows the end from the beginning. He's silent because he's already written your story, and he doesn't need to narrate every chapter for you to trust him. There is something mysterious about empty space. Something about the gap, the void, the nothingness that God chooses to use as his canvas. We look at empty spaces and we see lack. We see defeat. We see failure. But God looks at the same emptiness and he sees possibility. He sees preparation. He sees transformation. The empty space is not wasted space. It is working space. Think about the potter with the clay. He doesn't begin with a finished vessel. He begins with a lump, shapeless, unformed, empty of definition. And with every turn of the wheel, with every press of his hands, with every squeeze and shaping, transformation is taking place. But it doesn't happen instantly. The vessel spends time being shaped in what looks like emptiness. That's what God does with your life. He uses the empty spaces, the waiting seasons, the dry moments, the lonely rooms, to shape you, to stretch you, to transform you into the vessel He already designed in His mind. Transformation rarely happens in fullness. It happens in emptiness. It happens when what you thought you needed walks away. It happens when the job you depended on lets you go. It happens when the relationship you built your life on collapses. It happens when your plans fall apart and suddenly you're staring at an empty calendar, an empty room, and an empty heart. That's where God begins the deep work of transformation. Because as long as your hands are full, He can't place something new in them. But when they are empty, when there is space, when there is room, He can pour in vision. He can pour in strength. He can pour in wisdom. He can pour in Himself. When the children of Israel left Egypt, they didn't go straight into the promised land. They walked into the wilderness, an empty space, no cities, no vineyards, no markets, no temples, just wilderness. And it was in that empty space that God transformed them from slaves into a nation. It was in that empty space that He gave them manna from heaven. It was in that empty space that He brought water from the rock. It was in that empty space that He wrote His law on tablets of stone and put His presence in a tabernacle of glory. The wilderness didn't destroy them. The wilderness developed them. The wilderness didn't end them. The wilderness transformed them. The empty space is the place where God strips away the excess. It's where He burns off the dross. It's where He teaches you what really matters. In fullness, you can hide behind the noise. In fullness, you can disguise your weakness. But in emptiness, everything is exposed. Emptiness forces you to face yourself. Emptiness forces you to let go of what doesn't belong. Emptiness forces you to lean on Him in ways you never had to before. And in that leaning, in that pressing, in that crying out, transformation takes root. We think transformation happens in the spotlight, when people are watching, but the applause is loud. But real transformation is forged in hidden places, in silent nights, in empty rooms, when nobody knows your name, when nobody sees your tears, when nobody hears your prayers. That's where God is molding you. That's where He's chiseling away the rough edges. That's where He's shaping your character so that when He brings you into fullness, you can sustain the blessing He gives you. Look at the life of David. Before he ever sat on the throne, before he ever wore a crown, before the people ever shouted His name, he was in an empty field watching over sheep. It was in that empty space that God taught him how to fight lions and bears. It was in that empty space that he learned to play the harp. It was in that empty space that he wrote songs of worship. That empty field was not punishment. It was preparation. That empty field was not neglect. It was transformation. Because when the moment came for him to face Goliath, David didn't need to borrow courage from the crowd. He had already been transformed in the empty space. Some of you right now are despising your empty space. You look at your life and it feels barren. No progress. No recognition. No fruit. Just emptiness. But what you don't see is that in the silence, in the hidden place, in the emptiness, God is working on you. He's stretching your faith. He's sharpening your vision. He's enlarging your capacity. He's transforming you from who you were into who you were destined to become. Don't mistake emptiness for inactivity. Don't confuse quietness for abandonment. Don't misinterpret the empty space as wasted time. Transformation takes time. Transformation takes silence. Transformation takes emptiness. The caterpillar doesn't turn into a butterfly on a crowded stage. It turns in a cocoon, hidden, silent, empty of activity. To the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But on the inside, transformation is taking place. And when the time is right, what looked empty bursts forth in beauty. The same God who transformed water into wine, who transformed fishermen into apostles, who transformed a cross into a symbol of salvation, is the God who will use your empty space for transformation. You may not see it now. You may not feel it now. But He is working in the silence. He is shaping you in the waiting. He is molding you in the stillness. Transformation is happening in the empty space, even when you can't see it. When God steps into emptiness, He doesn't just bring enough to get by. He brings overflow. He doesn't just bring you to the edge of survival. He brings you into abundance. Because when God fills, He doesn't fill halfway. He doesn't stop at the line of just enough. He is a God of more than enough. And when He shows up in your empty room, He fills it to the point of overflow. You remember the wedding at Cana. They ran out of wine. An embarrassing, empty moment. The celebration was about to collapse under the weight of lack. And yet Jesus told them to bring water pots. Empty water pots. Fill them with water. And when He touched what was ordinary, it transformed into extraordinary. Not just enough wine, but the best wine. Not just enough to sip, but enough to overflow for the entire feast. That's how God works. He doesn't just give you a drop. He gives you a flood. He doesn't just give you a piece. He gives you the whole blessing pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Overflow means you don't just have enough for yourself. You have enough for others. When God fills you, He doesn't fill you for you alone. He fills you so that your life becomes a river, not a reservoir. Rivers flow. Rivers move. Rivers spread life everywhere they go. When He turns your emptiness into overflow, your cup begins to spill into other people's lives. You encourage them, you strengthen them, you lift them up, not because of your own strength, but because the overflow of God is running out of you. When the disciples came to Jesus with 5 loaves and 2 fish, they looked at Him and said, "What is this among so many?" That's the language of emptiness. That's the voice of lack. But when He took the little and blessed it, the same 5 loaves and 2 fish fed thousands. And not only did it feed them, it left 12 baskets of overflow. God was showing them and showing us that He doesn't just supply what you think you need. He exceeds it. He multiplies it. He turns lack into abundance and emptiness into overflow. Overflow is God's way of proving that He is the source. If He only gave you just enough, you might think you earned it. If He only gave you a little, you might think it was by your own power. But when He gives you overflow, when He opens the windows of heaven and pours out blessing, you don't have room to contain. You know it was Him. You know no man could have done it. You know no system could have supplied it. Overflow belongs to God. That's why David said, "My cup runneth over." He didn't say, "My cup is full." Full would have been enough. Full would have satisfied him. But God doesn't stop at full. God pours until it runs over. God blesses until there's no space left. God heals until the wound becomes a testimony. God provides until the need becomes a harvest. From empty to overflowing, that's the pattern of his power. But notice something important. Before the overflow comes the empty. Before the full nets come the empty nets. Peter fished all night and caught nothing. Empty nets. Frustration. Exhaustion. But it was in the emptiness that Jesus stepped in. He said, "Launch out into the deep and let down your nets." And when Peter obeyed, the same nets that had been empty a few hours ago were so full they began to break. The boats were so loaded they began to sink. From empty to overflowing. What changed? Not the nets, not the boat, not the sea. What changed was the presence of Jesus in the situation. When he shows up, emptiness doesn't stay empty. When he steps in, lack doesn't stay lack. When he moves, empty nets become overflowing nets. And it's the same in your life. Don't despise your empty places, because those are the very places where overflow is coming. The bank account that looks empty is where he's about to show himself as provider. The heart that feels empty is where he's about to pour his love. The dreams that seem empty are where he's about to release vision. The future that looks empty is where he's about to release abundance. From empty to overflowing, that's his signature move. Overflow is not about luxury, it's about testimony. Overflow is God saying to the world, "See what I can do with nothing. See what I can create out of emptiness. See how I take a barren womb and bring forth nations. See how I take a valley of dry bones and turn it into an army. See how I take an empty cross and make it the symbol of eternal life." Overflow is God proving that he is not limited by your lack. And here's the thing, overflow doesn't wait until everything looks right. Overflow doesn't wait until conditions are perfect. Overflow shows up in unlikely places, in empty rooms, in broken lives, in weary hearts. Overflow breaks into the spaces we least expect and transforms them into testimonies that can't be denied. From empty to overflowing. That's not just a promise. That's the story of redemption. That's the rhythm of grace. That's the evidence of God's hand at work.